I woke up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the house. The sun streamed through the curtains, casting a warm glow over everything. I stretched, feeling the soft sheets against my skin, and listened to the familiar sounds of our home. From downstairs, I heard the gentle clinking of dishes and the cheerful giggles of my 8-year-old daughter, Olivia. I got out of bed and slipped on my robe, smiling at the thought of my perfect little family. As I walked down the stairs, I saw Anne, my wife, standing by the kitchen counter, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. She looked up and smiled at me, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she said, handing me a mug. "I made your favorite, French roast." "Thanks, honey," I replied, taking a sip. "Where's Olivia?" "In the living room, watching cartoons," Anne said, nodding towards the other room. "She's been up for hours." I walked into the living room and saw Olivia sitting cross-legged on the floor, her eyes glued to the TV. She turned her head when she heard me, her face lighting up with a big grin. "Daddy," she exclaimed, jumping up and running over to hug me. "Look, it's my favorite show." I ruffled her hair and kissed the top of her head. "I see that pumpkin. Having a good morning?" "Yes, Mommy made pancakes and I got to put extra syrup on mine," she said, her eyes twinkling with excitement. I laughed and walked back into the kitchen, where Anne was flipping through a newspaper. I leaned against the counter, taking another sip of coffee. "Everything okay?" I asked, noticing the frown on her face. "Yeah, just some work stuff," she replied, waving it off. "Nothing to worry about." I nodded, trusting her. Anne was always so composed, so put together. I admired that about her. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of laughter and light. We ate breakfast together, talked about our plans for the day, and enjoyed each other's company. It was one of those perfect mornings that you want to bottle up and keep forever. But as the day went on, I couldn't shake a strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. It was like a storm cloud hovering on the horizon, barely visible, but undeniably there. I tried to ignore it, to push it away, but it lingered, casting a shadow over my thoughts. In the afternoon, I received a text message that made my heart stop. I stared at my phone, reading and rereading the words, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. "Anne," I called, my voice shaking. She looked up from her book, her face calm and serene. "Yes, dear." "We need to talk," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Now." Anne's eyes widened and she set the book down, her expression shifting to one of concern. "What is it, Andrew? What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I got a message. It's about you." Her face paled, and for a moment, she looked like a stranger to me. "What kind of message?" she asked, her voice tight. It's about you and someone else," I said, my voice breaking. Anne's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. "Andrew, I can explain," she started, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Just tell me the truth, Anne," I said, my heart aching. "Please." And that's when everything changed. The perfect morning shattered like glass, and the storm that had been brewing on the horizon finally hit. This chapter sets the stage for the unfolding drama, capturing the serene moments of a seemingly perfect family before the revelation that changes everything. The dialogues are simple and relatable, adding depth to the characters and their relationships. The truth was a jagged pill to swallow. After Anne's revelation, I felt like I was living in a fog, moving through the days in a daze. The life I thought I knew was crumbling, and I had to find out how deep the cracks went. I spent the next few days piecing things together. I started with the little things that had bothered me for weeks, but which I had brushed aside. The late nights at the office, the secretive phone calls, the sudden need for space. One evening, after putting Olivia to bed, I sat down with Anne in the living room. The silence between us was heavy, filled with words left unsaid. Finally, I broke it. "Anne, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but filled with pain. She looked up from her book, her eyes tired. "I know, Andrew. We do. How long has this been going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She sighed and set her book down, folding her hands in her lap. "A few months. It started as a friendship, but then it became more." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my heart aching. Why lie to me? Anne looked down, unable to meet my eyes. I was scared, Andrew. Scared of what it would do to us, to Olivia. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to hurt me, I said, my voice rising. Do you have any idea how much this hurts? She flinched, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Andrew. I never meant for it to go this far. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. Who was he? His name is Michael, she said quietly. He's a lawyer. We met at a work event. A lawyer. Of course. Someone successful, charming, everything I was not. I felt a surge of anger, but I pushed it down. I needed to stay focused to understand. Does Olivia know? I asked, my voice trembling. Anne shook her head. No, she thinks we're just friends. I didn't want to confuse her. I nodded, feeling a small relief. At least our daughter was spared for now. But the thought of her being caught in the middle of this mess made my heart break. Anne, I need to know everything, I said firmly. No more secrets. She nodded, wiping her tears. Okay, Andrew, I'll tell you everything. And she did. She told me about the lunches, the late-night phone calls, the weekends when she said she was working, but was really with him. Every word was like a knife, cutting deeper and deeper. As she spoke, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness. But underneath it all, there was a strange sense of relief. At least now I knew the truth. At least now I could begin to move forward. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying our conversation over and over in my mind. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed the signs? The next day, I decided to take action. I needed to confront Michael, to look him in the eye and understand what he saw in my wife. I called in a favor from a friend who worked in the legal field and got Michael's contact information. I drove to his office, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. When I arrived, I walked in, trying to keep my composure. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile. Can I help you? She asked. I'm here to see Michael, I said, my voice firm. Tell him Andrew is here. She nodded and made a quick call. A few moments later, a tall, well-dressed man walked out. Michael. He looked surprised to see me, but quickly masked it with a smile. Andrew, I presume, he said, extending his hand. I ignored his hand and looked him straight in the eyes. We need to talk. He nodded, gesturing for me to follow him into his office. Once inside, I closed the door behind me. I know about you and Anne, I said, cutting straight to the point. Michael's face remained calm, but I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. I figured you might, he said softly. Andrew, I never meant to cause you pain. Well, you did, I said, my voice shaking with anger. What do you think you're doing with my wife? It's complicated, he said, running a hand through his hair. We didn't plan for this to happen. It just did. That's not good enough, I said, leaning forward. She's my wife, Michael. We have a child together. He sighed, looking genuinely remorseful. I know, Andrew, and I'm sorry. But you have to understand, Anne and I, we have a connection. A connection? I said, scoffing. Do you have any idea what this is doing to our family? Michael looked down, his shoulders slumping. I do, and I'm truly sorry. But Anne deserves to be happy, and if that's with me, then so be it. I felt a surge of anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'm not giving up on my family without a fight, I said firmly. This isn't over. I turned and walked out of his office, my mind racing. I had a lot to think about, and even more to fight for. As I drove home, I realized that the storm was far from over, but I was ready to face it head on. The day after I confronted Michael, the tension in our home was palpable. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. Every glance Anne and I exchanged was heavy with unspoken words. Olivia, thankfully, was blissfully unaware, busying herself with her toys and schoolwork. I knew I couldn't let this drag on. We needed to have a real conversation, to lay everything out on the table. That evening, after putting Olivia to bed, I found Anne sitting on the sofa, staring blankly at the TV. Anne, we need to talk, I said, standing in the doorway. She muted the TV and looked at me, her face a mixture of fear and resignation. I know, she replied softly. Let's talk. I sat down across from her, taking a deep breath. I went to see Michael yesterday, I began. Her eyes widened in surprise. You did? What did he say? He confirmed what you told me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But this isn't about him. It's about us. And why? Why did you feel the need to look elsewhere? She sighed, running a hand through her hair. Andrew, it wasn't something I planned. I didn't wake up one day and decide to cheat on you. It just happened. But why? I pressed. What was missing? What did I do wrong? Anne looked down, her eyes filling with tears. It's not that simple. It's not about what you did or didn't do. It's about me. I've felt lost for a long time, like I'm just going through the motions. Michael made me feel alive again. I felt the pain of hurt, but I tried to understand. So you felt lost, and instead of talking to me, you turned to someone else. She nodded, wiping her tears. I know it was wrong, Andrew. I know I hurt you. But I was afraid. Afraid that you wouldn't understand or that you wouldn't care. Anne, I love you, I said, my voice breaking. I care more than anything. If you had come to me, we could have worked through this together. She looked up, her eyes searching mine. Do you really think we can fix this? After everything that's happened? I don't know I admit it, but I'm willing to try if you are. For us, for Olivia. Anne nodded slowly. I want to try too, but it won't be easy. No, it won't, I agreed. But we owe it to ourselves to at least try. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of our words sinking in. Finally, I spoke again. There's something else, I said. I can't just ignore what you've done. I need time to process, to heal. We both do. Anne nodded. I understand. I'll give you all the time you need. For the next few weeks, we tried to navigate this new reality. We went to counseling, had difficult conversations, and slowly started to rebuild our trust. It was a long and painful process, but we were both committed to making it work. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching Olivia play in the yard, Anne turned to me. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? I asked, surprised. For giving us a second chance, she replied. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful. I took her hand in mine, squeezing it gently. We're in this together, Anne. We'll figure it out. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over our home, I felt a glimmer of hope. The storm wasn't over, but we were facing it together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we might just make it through. This chapter explores the difficult and emotional confrontation between Andrew and Anne, highlighting their pain and their commitment to trying to rebuild their relationship. The dialogues are straightforward and heartfelt, making the situation relatable and engaging for the reader. The days that followed our confrontation were a blur of tension and awkward attempts at normalcy. Anne and I were doing our best to rebuild what was broken, but the wound was still fresh. Olivia, sensing the strain, clung to us more than usual, her innocent questions cutting through the air like knives. One evening, after an especially strained dinner, Anne and I were in the living room, pretending to watch TV. Olivia had already gone to bed, her soft snores audible from upstairs. I turned to Anne, deciding it was time to have another difficult conversation. And we need to talk about the next steps, I said quietly. She muted the TV and faced me, her eyes weary. What do you mean? About us, about Olivia, I replied. We can't keep living in this limbo. We need a plan. Anne nodded slowly. I know. I've been thinking about it too. Maybe we should take a break. Some time apart to figure things out. My heart sank. A break? What about Olivia? She needs both of us. We'll explain it to her as best we can, Anne said, her voice trembling. But I think some time apart might help us see things more clearly. I wanted to argue, to plead with her to stay, but deep down, I knew she was right. Maybe some distance would give us the clarity we needed. We spent the next hour discussing logistics, trying to keep the conversation as calm and rational as possible. The next morning, I woke up to find the house eerily quiet. I checked Olivia's room, expecting to find her still asleep, but her bed was empty. Panic started to rise in my chest as I called out for her. Olivia? Anne? No answer. I rushed to the living room and found a note on the coffee table. My hands trembled as I picked it up and began to read. Andrew, I'm sorry, but I had to leave. Olivia and I are staying with my mother for a while. We both need some space. I'll call you later to explain. Anne. I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. This wasn't just a break. It felt like she was running away. I grabbed my phone and dialed Anne's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Desperation clawed at me as I tried her mother's house, but there was no answer there either. I called the police, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. They assured me they would do everything they could, but I knew it wasn't a simple case of abduction. Anne had taken Olivia, and legally, she had every right to do so. The next few hours were a nightmare. I paced the house, waiting for the phone to ring, but it stayed silent. I called friends, family, anyone who might know where Anne had gone, but no one had any information. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. Late in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. My heart pounded as I opened it. Daddy, Mommy, and I are at Grandma's. She said we need a little trip. I miss you. Love, Olivia. Tears blurred my vision as I read her words. At least I knew she was safe. But the thought of not seeing her, not holding her, was unbearable. I replied quickly, trying to keep my message upbeat. I miss you too, sweetheart. Be good for Mommy and Grandma. I'll see you soon. Love, Daddy. Days turned into weeks and I heard nothing from Anne. I tried to stay busy, throwing myself into work and keeping the house tidy, but the emptiness gnawed at me. Every night, I went to bed with a heavy heart, wondering if tomorrow would bring any news. One evening, as I sat on the porch, my phone rang. It was Anne. Andrew, it's me, she said, her voice sounding small and tired. Anne, where are you? Why did you leave like that? I demanded, struggling to keep my voice steady. I'm sorry, she said. I needed time to think. I thought some distance would help, but I miss you, Andrew. Olivia misses you too. Then come home, I said, my voice breaking. We can work through this together. She was silent for a long moment. I want to, but I'm scared. Scared that things will go back to the way they were. They won't, I promised. We'll take it one day at a time. Just come home. Finally, she agreed. Okay, we'll come back tomorrow. Relief washed over me, but it was tinged with the knowledge that our journey was far from over. As I hung up the phone, I looked up at the stars, feeling a glimmer of hope. The storm hadn't passed, but at least now we were facing it together. This chapter delves into the emotional turmoil of Anne and Olivia's disappearance, highlighting Andrew's desperation and fear. The dialogues are simple and heartfelt, making the situation relatable and engaging for the reader. The morning after Anne's call, I woke up early, filled with a nervous energy. Today, they were coming home. I busied myself tidying the house, making sure everything was perfect for their return. The air was filled with a strange mix of anxiety and anticipation. Around noon, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart pounded as I rushed to the front door. There they were, Anne and Olivia, looking tired but familiar. Olivia spotted me and her face lit up with a smile. Daddy, she cried, running towards me. I scooped her up in my arms, holding her tight. I missed you so much, Pumpkin, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I missed you too, she replied, hugging me back just as tightly. Anne stood by the car, watching us with a tentative smile. I set Olivia down and walked over to her. Hi, I said softly. Hi, she replied. It's good to be home. We stood there for a moment, awkwardly, before heading inside. Olivia ran off to her room, excited to be back with her toys. Anne and I sat down at the kitchen table, the tension between us palpable. Thank you for coming back, I said, breaking the silence. Anne nodded. I realized that running away wasn't the answer. We need to face this together. I agree, I said. We need to talk about everything, figure out a way forward. Anne took a deep breath. I've been thinking a lot about us, about what went wrong. I know I made a terrible mistake, and I'm truly sorry for the pain I've caused. I know, I said, but we can't change the past. We can only work on our future. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. Do you think we can fix this, Andrew? Do you really believe we can? I do, I replied, reaching for her hand. But it's going to take time and effort from both of us. We need to be honest with each other, and we need to communicate. And squeeze my hand. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I want to make this work for us and for Olivia. We spent the next few hours talking, really talking. We discussed our fears, our hopes, and the things that had driven us apart. It was painful, but it was also healing. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Later that evening, we sat down for dinner as a family. Olivia chattered happily about her time at Grandma's, blissfully unaware of the heavy conversation that had taken place earlier. "Daddy, can we go to the park tomorrow?" she asked, her eyes shining with excitement. "Of course, Pumpkin," I replied, smiling. "We'll go first thing in the morning." Anne looked at me, a soft smile on her lips. "That sounds nice. Maybe we can have a picnic too." "I'd like that," I said, feeling a warmth spread through me. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't seem so bleak. After dinner, Anne and I put Olivia to bed together. As we tucked her in, she looked up at us with a contented smile. "I'm glad we're all back together," she said sleepily. "So are we, sweetheart," Anne said, brushing a strand of hair from Olivia's forehead. We stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her drift off to sleep. Then we headed downstairs, where we sat on the porch, the cool evening air wrapping around us. "Do you remember when we used to do this all the time?" Anne asked, looking out at the stars. "I do," I said, a smile tugging at my lips. "We'd sit out here for hours, just talking and enjoying each other's company." Anne sighed. "I wanted to get back to that, Andrew. I want us to be that couple again." "We can," I said, taking her hand. "It won't be easy, but if we both work at it, we can find our way back." As we sat there, hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't going to be an easy road, but for the first time in a long time, I believed we could make it. We had a long way to go, but we had taken the first step, and that was enough for now. This chapter captures the tentative steps towards reconciliation, highlighting the emotional conversations and the small moments of hope that signal a possible path forward. The dialogues are simple and heartfelt, making the situation relatable and engaging for the reader. A few months had passed since Anne and Olivia returned home. We were making progress, slowly but surely. The wounds were still there, but they were healing. I was hopeful for our future, but I also had a secret weighing heavily on my heart. One evening, after Olivia had gone to bed, I sat down with Anne in the living room. She was reading a book, her face peaceful. I took a deep breath, knowing that what I had to say would shatter this moment of calm. "Anne, we need to talk," I said, my voice trembling. She looked up, concern filling her eyes. "What is it, Andrew?" I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "There's something I've been hiding from you. Something important." She frowned, setting her book aside. "What do you mean?" "I've been feeling unwell for a while now," I began, my throat tightening. "I went to the doctor a few weeks ago, and they did some tests. Anne, I have an aggressive form of brain cancer." Her face went pale, her eyes widening in shock. "What? No, no, this can't be true." I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. "It's true. The doctors say it's terminal. I don't have much time left." Anne's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't want to burden you," I said, my voice breaking. "With everything we've been through, I didn't want to add to your pain." Anne shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Andrew, you should have told me. We could have faced this together." "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I thought I could handle it on my own, but I was wrong. I need you, Anne. I need you now more than ever." She pulled me into her arms, sobbing into my shoulder. "We'll get through this," she said, her voice choked with tears. "We'll fight this together." The next few weeks were a blur of doctor visits, treatments, and emotional conversations. Olivia knew something was wrong, but we tried to keep her life as normal as possible. She was our ray of sunshine, her innocence and joy giving us strength. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch, Olivia came and sat beside me. She looked up at me with her big, curious eyes. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked. I smiled, ruffling her hair. "I'm fine, Pumpkin. Just thinking." She nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Olivia," I said, my heart aching with the knowledge that I wouldn't be there to watch her grow up. That evening, Anne and I put Olivia to bed together. As we tucked her in, she looked up at us with a sleepy smile. Daddy, will you read me a story? She asked. Of course, I said, picking up her favorite book. I read to her until she fell asleep, her small hand clutching mine. Once she was asleep, Anne and I went downstairs. We sat on the porch, the cool night air wrapping around us. I looked up at the stars, feeling a sense of peace. Anne, there's something I need to ask you, I said, turning to face her. Anything, she replied, her eyes filled with love. When the time comes, I want you to promise me that you'll move on, that you'll be happy, I said, my voice shaking. Find someone who will love you and Olivia the way you deserve to be loved. Anne's eyes filled with tears. Andrew, I can't think about that now. Please, I whispered. Promise me. She nodded, her tears falling freely. I promise. We sat there in silence, holding each other. The future was uncertain, but for now, we had each other. And that was enough. The next morning, I woke up feeling weaker than usual. Anne insisted on taking me to the hospital. As we sat in the waiting room, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I knew my time was running out, but I was at peace. Later that day, as I lay in the hospital bed, surrounded by Anne and Olivia, I felt a deep sense of love and gratitude. My family was my greatest gift, and I would cherish every moment with them. Thank you for everything, I whispered to Anne, my voice barely audible. She held my hand, tears streaming down her face. I love you, Andrew. Always. I love you too, I said, my eyes closing. Take care of Olivia. Be happy. As I took my final breath, I felt a sense of peace. I had lived a good life, filled with love and joy. And now, it was time to say goodbye. This chapter captures the emotional and heart-wrenching moments of Andrew's final days, highlighting the deep love and connection between him, Anne, and Olivia. The dialogues are simple and heartfelt, making the situation relatable and engaging for the reader. It had been 6 months since Andrew's passing. The days were still tinged with sadness, but life had a way of moving forward. I could see it in Olivia's laughter and the way the sun still rose every morning. We were learning to live with the loss, finding small joys amid the sorrow. One bright Saturday morning, I decided it was time for a change. The house, filled with so many memories, felt too quiet and too empty. I sat down with Olivia at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in my hands and her favorite cereal in front of her. Olivia, I began, trying to sound upbeat, how would you feel about a fresh start? Maybe moving to a new place. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. A new house, Mommy. Yes, sweetie. A new house, somewhere we can make new memories. Olivia thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Can we have a garden? I want to plant flowers like Daddy used to. I smiled, tears welling up in my eyes. Of course we can. We'll plant all kinds of flowers. Over the next few weeks, we looked at houses together. It was a bittersweet process, but it felt good to focus on something positive. One day, we found it. A cozy house with a big backyard perfect for a garden. It felt right, like a place where we could start over. Moving day came quickly. Our friends and family helped us pack, and soon we were standing in our new living room, surrounded by boxes. Olivia ran through the house, exploring every nook and cranny, her laughter echoing off the walls. Mommy, come see my room, she called. I followed her upstairs, smiling in her excitement. Her new room was bright and cheerful, with a big window that let in lots of light. Olivia had already decided where all her toys and books would go. Do you like it? I asked. She nodded vigorously. I love it. It's perfect. That night, after Olivia was asleep, I sat on the porch, looking up at the stars. I felt a mix of emotions, sadness, relief, hope. Andrew's absence was a constant ache, but I knew he would be proud of us for finding the strength to move forward. As I sat there, my neighbor from across the street walked over. He was a friendly-looking man, about my age, with kind eyes and a warm smile. Hi there, he said, extending his hand. I'm Mark. Welcome to the neighborhood. Thank you, I replied, shaking his hand. I'm Anne. It's nice to meet you. We chatted for a while, and I learned that Mark had two kids around Olivia's age. He offered to introduce us to some of the other families on the street, and I felt a sense of relief. Maybe this new beginning wouldn't be so hard after all. The next day, Mark and his kids came over to help us settle in. Olivia made fast friends with them, and soon they were running around the backyard, playing and laughing. It was a beautiful sight, one that filled me with hope. As the weeks passed, we settled into a new routine. Olivia started at her new school and made lots of friends. I began to volunteer at the community center, finding purpose in helping others. Life was different, but it was good. One evening, as we sat down to dinner, Olivia looked up at me with a thoughtful expression. "Mommy, do you think Daddy can see us? Do you think he's happy?" I reached across the table and took her hand. "I think Daddy is always with us, in our hearts, and I think he is very happy to see us living our lives and finding joy again." Olivia smiled, her eyes shining. "I think so too." That night, as I tucked Olivia into bed, she hugged me tightly. "I love you, Mommy." "I love you too, sweetie," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "More than anything." As I turned off the light and closed her door, I felt a sense of peace. Our journey had been difficult, and the road ahead would have its challenges, but we were moving forward. We were finding our way, one day at a time. And in that moment, I knew that Andrew's wish for us was coming true. We were healing, we were growing, and we were creating a new life filled with love and hope. It was a new beginning, and it was beautiful. This chapter captures the bittersweet yet hopeful transition of Anne and Olivia as they move forward with their lives. The dialogues are simple and heartfelt, making the situation relatable and engaging for the reader.